Good evening, members, and welcome to the first meeting of the Standards Committee in 22-23. The first task is to elect a chairman. Could I ask for nominations for chairman, please? Councillor Knight.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. I'd like to nominate Councillor Peter Bradbury, please.
And do I have a seconder for that, please?
So I'd like to second that, please.
I've got a nomination for Councillor Pete Bradbury for chairman. Do I have any other nominations? Seeing none, could I ask Councillor Bradbury to come forward and take over the meeting?
Thank you very much, and good evening, colleagues. Well, in the reverse of what normally it's a bit out with the new and in with the old, isn't it? So, but very nice to be back in the chair here, and just start by thanking Councillor Bennett for her, Councillor Liz Bennett, that is, I hasten to add, for her work. Other colleagues will be aware she's had to step down because of work commitments. So we wish her well in her new job, I'm sure. Colleagues, the first job I've got to do, therefore, is the appointment of a vice chairman. So, if I may, from the chair, I'd like to propose Councillor Chris Ash-Edwards. And can I see a seconder for that? Councillor?
I'm happy to second Councillor Ash-Edwards, Chairman.
Thank you very much. And are there any other nominations? I'm not seeing any, so Councillor Ash-Edwards is elected. To receive apologies for absence, I'm afraid we've got quite a long list. So we have apologies from Councillor Denham St Pinnock, Councillor Smith, Councillor Von Thunderclap, Councillor Karen Healy, and Councillor Rod Clark, who unfortunately has got COVID, and also from the third independent member, Mr. Paul Cummings. And I think that accounts for everyone. Item 40, considering there's no items of urgent business. Item 5, declaration of interest from members. And if I can go first, I'd like to declare my interest as a member of as a chairman of West Sussex County Council, and therefore also as the chairman of standards at West Sussex County Council, because that's ex officio with the post of chairman. Just to be clear, by the way, I have checked with the legal officers at both councils, and there's no conflict in that. Anyone else got any interest to declare? No. And just while we're on that subject, I'd like to particularly welcome Councillor Knight to his first I think it's your first meeting of this committee, isn't it? I think we're very lucky to have such a experienced and knowledgeable councillor who's got quite a long history of outstanding public service, be a great member of this committee. So very nice to have Councillor Knight with us. Item 6 then, colleagues, to confirm the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 7th of March. I actually wasn't here, so I'm kind of looking to those who were here to just check that they're an accurate record. And I see Dr. Horn is... Are you wanting to speak, or you're just saying they're an accurate record?
Chair, they are an accurate record.
If you wait for your... There you are, you're on now.
Yes, while I think they are an accurate record, there is just a text point in, it's on the page 4 in the middle paragraph that begins "an independent person," and on the second line of that sentence, just the words have got a bit garbled in the middle. It should read "comments on the offer of training," not as set out in the text. It's only a very small point, Chair. Forgive me for raising it.
Thank you for spotting that, because I didn't. So, if there's no other corrections, and are we happy to accept these as true record, colleagues? Do I need to take a vote on that, or there's a show of hands over?
Show of hands will be fine.
So that's okay? Yeah. You weren't here, I wasn't here. Okay, so we've got some who were. Thank you. Okay. I think we'll accept them anyway. So we've only got one substantive item on the agenda tonight, which is the government response to the Committee on Standards in Public Life report on local authority ethical standards. This is in your papers commencing on page 5, and I will ask Mr. Clark to introduce this item, please.
Yes, members will recall that there was the report from the Committee on Standards in Public Life into local government way back in January 2019, so it predated the pandemic. But we now have the response from the government, which is set out, and they respond in quite a easy way to follow, because all the recommendations of the committee are there with the government response. In summary, you could say it's not going to be a whole change. There's no big change expected. But I wonder, Chairman, if members want to go through each recommendation and if they've got any comments on them. What I would say is we have adopted the LGA code, of that. So we've got that far. And also, many of the towns and parishes have come back to me to say that they've done the same. And I think the County Council is doing the same. So that element in mid-Sussex has worked well for us. You'll note in particular, as the report picks up, that there is no prospect at the moment of any arrangement where we can suspend members as we had prior to 2010. So we are still effectively in the local system of dealing with complaints. I don't know, on the whole, it hasn't seemed too bad, but I don't know what others think.
Well, we will find out, no doubt, as we go through. So that's entirely what I wanted to do. Just to, first of all, on page 7, there's a copy of the letter from Kemi Badenoch MP to the chairman of the committee, which I think is self-explanatory. But I don't know if anyone's got any particular comments or thoughts or questions on that letter. Okay, I'm not seeing anybody. So I think what we will do is we'll go through these recommendations one by one. Anyone who wants to comment or speak, just please press your microphone button, and if you your microphone, I think everyone knows your microphone will flash green, and when it turns red, then your microphone will be live. And if you press your microphone button and someone else is speaking, it'll be a steady green until it's your turn to speak. And if there's lots of speakers, the system just picks up in the order that people press their button. I may not necessarily follow that order. We'll see how we go. So we're starting, colleagues, if I may, at the top of page 8. The local LGA should create an updated model code of conduct in consultation with representative bodies of councillors and officers. And I'm obviously not going to read out all the comments. Has anyone got any comment on that? No? Okay. Recommendation 2. Government should ensure candidates standing for accepting public office are not publicly required to disclose their home address, etc. Anyone got any comments or thoughts on that? Okay, not seeing anyone there. Recommendation 3, councillors should be presumed to be acting in an official capacity in their public conduct, including statements on publicly accessible social media. Just the one thought I've got on that, and it's not completely clear from this, I don't think. But if you have a social media account that is limited to people that you've approved to see it, that presumably is not covered by publicly accessible social media, Mr. Clark.
Yes, Chairman, that probably is the case. But as we know with the social media complaints, we have to look at them quite carefully to decide whether the code is applying or not applying. I think the recommendation is that we carry on doing that. It's difficult to say that necessarily something in private will be out outside the code, because the problem with social media is someone within your group could then put it into the wider social media. So you are relying on other people doing as you expect them to do rather than what actually happens.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's strictly the case, because certainly I know on Facebook, for example, if you've got a private Facebook account, as I have, and if you post something that's private only to people who are your friends, I think is the term, isn't it, on Facebook, you can't actually, they can't actually then share that. So anyway, I think it's always, it's wise to be cautious, I think, is the thing. Anyone else on that? If not, we'll move on to recommendation 4. The Act should be amended to state that a local authority's code of conduct applies to a member when they claim to act or give the impression they are acting in their capacity as a member. And this is an area that is I know from personal experience, not from me doing it personally, but someone who was on a parish council with me some years ago, who regularly used to say, I'm here representing the parish councils and this is what we think, when in actual fact he wasn't actually speaking on behalf of the parish council at all. He was speaking on behalf of himself. So anyway, anyone got any comments or thoughts on this? No? Okay.
Can I just comment, Chairman?
Yeah, sorry, please. Sorry, I didn't see you.
That is an area fraught. We have people turn up here sometimes wanting to talk about the planning applications on behalf of a parish council. When we check, they haven't been authorised at all by the parish council. They're doing exactly as you say and speaking their own views. So what people say and what they're actually doing is not necessarily always the same thing.
And a caution for all of us as well that we don't make the same mistake, which of course I'm sure none of us do. Recommendation 5. The pecuniary interest regulation should be amended to include unpaid directorships, trusteeships, management roles in a charity, etc., etc. I think that's pretty straightforward. I mean, I think the point of that is that you've got an interest whether you're getting paid for doing that work or not. And so, I mean, for example, I'm chairman of a charity, the charity Building Heroes, which I often declare if, for example, there's any discussion of, things that might appertain to a military charity. Clearly, that's voluntary work. So, Mr. Clark.
Yeah. Just on that, Chairman, our declaration form does include them, not as disclosable pecuniary interest, but as interest. So you're quite right, if it comes up, you'd have to disclose it. I think also what this was trying to get at was the question of spouses and partners, the suggestion being that it goes too far in saying spouses and partners' interests have to be declared, but you'll see the government aren't suggesting a change in that. So we are where we are with that, but I know some people object to or their partners object to having their business put on a publicly accessible website merely because their partner is a councillor.
Yeah, and the government does say they're keeping that particular matter under review. So, and I agree, it can be intrusive for some people. So anyway, but I'm not seeing anyone want to comment on it. We're flying through this at the moment. So, recommendation 6 is about a register of gifts and hospitality, which I believe we already have in place. So, I don't know if anyone thinks that, those limits are reasonable. They seem reasonable to me. Okay. Recommendation 7 is. I struggle just a bit to interpret this bit. So, I think this is just saying that if you've got an interest that a member of the public would regard as prejudicial, then it is prejudicial, and you should treat it accordingly. Is that it in essence, Mr. Clark?
Yes, and I think we do that anyway. So I'm not sure, as you say, what this adds or takes away. Really.
No. Okay. Recommendation 8 relates to our independent persons appointed for a fixed term of 2 years, renewable once. I think, am I right? Do we have a slightly different?
Yes, we have 4 years, and I am quite relieved that the government have rejected the 2-year plan, because I think the independent members would hardly be in post before they were looking to come back again, and it's just too short for us continually trying to recruit people. So,
And do we have the 2-term limit? I don't think we
not
do.
officially, but in the past, members have felt that 2 terms is enough, or independent persons rather have felt 2 terms is enough.
Councillor Alison Bennett.
Thank you. I just wanted to check whether here it's an unpaid role, as it says in the government's response. I think there's an allowance, isn't there?
Mr. Clark?
Yes, there is an allowance.
And is that normal across
Well, other
local
people
authorities?
seem to have an allowance. I was surprised when it said it was an unpaid role, to be honest.
Okay. Anyone, neither of our independent persons want to comment on that? No? Okay. Recommendation 9 relates to transparency, should be updated to provide the view of the independent person in relation to a decision on which they can consult it, which the government has said it does not agree with. Okay, not seeing any.
I just say at the moment, Chairman, I tend to say I've consulted the independent person and in vague terms what their view is, but I certainly don't repeat that view. And on a FOI request, I don't hand that information out. So I think we sort of accord with what they're suggesting there.
Mm-hmm. And as the government said, it depends on circumstances, of course, as well. So, right. Recommendation 10 relates to suspending a councillor where the... but we don't have this suspension option at the moment, do we?
No. What this does is...
Did you wait for it? Sorry.
10, 12, 13, 14 and 16, and then it gives its response to all of them, which is basically that they're not going back to the old regime. So that would include suspension and the other matters listed there.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, Councillor, I was just contemplating something. So, Councillor Alison Bennett.
Thank you. The wording in the government response at the bottom I found quite peculiar, really. The penultimate line on page 12, where it talks about the chilling effect on free speech within local government. And then over on page 13, and it talks about councillors sitting in judgment on the political comments of fellow councillors. I found this thing about sitting in judgment on political comments a really peculiar thing to come up in the context of standards, where standards complaints, to my mind, aren't about criticising people's political views, but criticising people's breaches of the Nolan principles, which is, I think is a different thing. So I was wondering whether that was just, whether anybody else observed that, or if it's just me, really. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Eaves next.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I would tend to agree with Councillor Bennett on that. I do think it's odd. I mean, I also think it's a shame that we can't suspend councillors. There's no sanction for any bad behaviour. I think that's a great shame. Thank you.
Yeah, I think by and large I tend to agree with that as well. So, but the government seems unmoved on it at the moment. Mr. Clark, yeah.
I think if you want to investigate it further, go back to about 2010, and there was a view that Standards for England spent all their time refereeing political disputes, and that's why it was got rid of. I have to say our involvement with them, we didn't have that problem, but and also they were concerned about the cost of it all. But that's why they talk about the chilling effect, because there were some rather notorious cases that went on and on and on, and there were really one councillor being rude about another councillor and then them being rude in return. And it took an awful lot of time, and I think the government didn't want a repeat of that. Whether there's a means of getting a scheme without that, I don't know. People get very litigious.
Okay. I do agree that it does seem to me the range of sanctions that are available is somewhat inadequate in my opinion, but clearly the government doesn't agree with that. So recommendation is in relation to legal indemnity for the independent persons. I think that's. Do you want to comment on that, Mr. Clark?
Sorry, I'm commenting too much.
No, your view is always sage, so.
But
worth
because
listening
I don't give the views out publicly, there isn't that risk. That's why I don't do it.
Recommendation 15 relates to the transparency of publishing code of conduct complaints. I think this is something we do already, so I haven't particularly got anything to add to that. 17. This is about barring councillors from council premises or withdrawing facility as sanctions. And the government says they're going to consider it further. I don't know. I don't have as we said earlier, I could see people nodding. I'm not sure the range of sanctions we've got is sufficient. I'm not sure that's a particularly good sanction, but Mr. Clark, you may have a view.
Well, members may have seen a councillor, I think it was in Hertfordshire or somewhere, where one of the independent councillors made mooing noises or something all the way through council, and the police arrived, and I think eventually they did take him away. But it doesn't happen in many councils. This is the problem. You can legislate for that one-off event, but does that happen very many places? I don't think. I've never come across it. But perhaps we're about to get the mooing councillor, but it seems unlikely. Mooing.
Okay. So recommendation 18, which is about the criminal offences of the Localism Act in relation to disclosing pecuniary interests, and the committee wanted to abolish it. The government's rejecting that, saying that it's a useful deterrent as a high bar. Generally speaking, I think personally I would agree with that. And there should be no reason, you know, not to disclose a pecuniary interest. So. You know, if you get yourself elected into a position of office, then you know you do that in the knowledge that transparency and etc. is a requirement. Do you not? So. Okay. So recommendation 20 is that parish councils should be forced to adopt the code of conduct of their principal authority, and the government said that's not necessary. I mean, we have encouraged all our parish councils to adopt the code, and I know the county council is contemplating doing the same, and I think we've discussed in this chamber before around this that the benefit to members of the public sitting outside the system, if I can call it that, is that it could be terribly confusing if you know, one of their local councils has a different code of conduct in some way to another council. So I think I think we've discussed that before. I don't know if anyone's got anything they want to add to that. So I think we're in agreement with the government's thoughts there. Recommend 21. It is amended to state that any sanction imposed following a breach is to be determined by the relevant principal authority. I thought that was the case anyway. Mr. Clark.
That is the case, Chairman. There was the case in, I think it was Leinster, where the council investigated something and tried to suspend a member, and then it was investigated by Hereford County or Hereford Council, and it all got in a terrible muddle and ended up in the High Court. But that is merely stating what the position is following that High Court case.
You're right. Okay.
That the parishes and towns have to refer matters to here for investigation. They can't do their own investigation.
Yeah. I think we have had one case where we did have to discuss that for some reason here. But anyway, so I think that's fairly, straightforward enough, isn't it? Recommendation 22, disciplinary protections for statutory officers extends to all disciplinary action, not just dismissal. Can you explain this a little for us, Mr. Clark?
Well, there is protection for statutory officers, and it relates to dismissal. This is suggesting it should be wider. I think the government's saying that they're satisfied with what the arrangements are at the moment.
Okay, not seeing any comments on that. LGO Transparency Code should be updated to provide that local authorities ensure their whistleblowing policy specifies a named contact, and the government agrees with that. Is this something that we do already?
We have a whistleblowing policy, yes.
Yeah. Does it have a named contact?
I don't know, Chairman. I'd have to look at it.
Councillor Alison Bennett.
Thank you, Chairman. I read that earlier on, and I Googled for it on the MSDC website and couldn't find any reference to our whistleblowing policy. So I wonder whether that's something that we can make a recommendation to be looked at.
Yeah, I think that's very sensible. Thank you for that, because I do think to have a whistleblowing policy that's easy for people to find is
It
really
may be
important.
there, of course. I may just have failed to find the right bit on when I Googled it, but it wasn't at the top of the list.
Well, if some of your abilities can't find it, then it's clearly not transparent enough. So Mr. Clark will take that away, and I think there's a recommendation there that we make sure our whistleblowing policy is easy to find and has a named contact. Yeah. Okay. And then recommendation 24. Councillors should be listed as prescribed purposes. Prescribed persons, I beg your pardon. Can you explain this one? Sorry, Mr. Clark, I keep coming to you, but if you can explain this one for us, please, because I was didn't quite follow this.
Yeah, I did look it up, and I wasn't really any the wiser.
Right, okay.
But
I think it's basically saying that members of the public can contact you if they've got a problem, which I think is it goes with the job description, doesn't it? Councillor Ash Edwards.
Thank you, Chairman. I had a quick look at this, and this mostly seems to be organisations. So, for example, if you want to whistleblow about financial fraud, you can speak to the Bank of England. There's a contact available on the government website to say who you should contact at the Bank of England, and various other things. So it seems a bit odd to me to expect this to be councillors within the list.
Okay. Anyway, I'm not seeing any other comments on that. So that takes us all the way through that. So unless anyone got any more comments or general comments to make, anything like that? If not, I'll take you to the recommendation, which is on about halfway down page 5. Committee is recommended to comment on the responses to the Committee on Standards in Public Life report and discuss how that might affect the way standards are dealt with at Mid-Sussex District Council and in the parishes in Mid-Sussex, which I think we've commented on. And I'm sure Alex has captured all those comments for us, and those will be published in the minutes and presumably sent back to the Committee for Standards in Public Life.
we could send them to the government and the Committee on Standards in Public Life. 'Cause
Yeah,
we're
I would think that would be the
both.
sensible thing
And
to
of
do.
course, I've got Alison, Councillor Bennett's check on the whistleblowing policy, so it's easily accessible and there is a contact.
Okay. So, is that agreed, colleagues? Agreed. Thank you very much indeed. There's no questions under item 8, so declare meeting closed at 6:30. Thank you very much.